My fiancé called me ugly in front of his friends and dumped me in the middle of a restaurant. And the sickest part is that for the first minute, I still thought he was about to propose. That's how sure I was that this night was supposed to go completely differently. I'm 32, he's 34. And we'd been together for almost 4 years. For months he'd been dropping hints about big changes, asking my ring size in this fake casual way, sending me videos of dogs with babies and saying things like, "You like this, right?" My sister told me to book an appointment to get my nails done, just in case. His mom texted me the morning of the dinner and said, "So excited for tonight. You deserve it." I'm not stupid. I can put things together. He told me to wear the blue dress he loved, the one he said made my eyes look bright. He said it was going to be a night to remember, and that we'd be meeting his friends at his favorite restaurant to celebrate. I spent the afternoon doing my hair and makeup, trying to keep my expectations low, but my heart was racing the whole time. I even put my phone on silent so I wouldn't ruin the moment if it happened. When I got to the restaurant, everyone was already there. His friends, their girlfriends, a couple of people from his work I barely knew. He'd reserved this long table near the back with candles and those little table numbers, and there was a weird, excited energy in the air. One of his friends whistled when he saw me and said, "Damn, she actually tried." Everyone laughed. I told myself it was just dumb guy humor and sat down next to Daniel. He didn't say I looked beautiful. He just glanced at me and said, "You clean up nice," then turned back to his friend to finish talking about fantasy football. That was the first tiny crack in the picture I had in my head, but I ignored it. I ordered a drink, tried to make small talk with the girls, and waited for that moment I'd imagined 100 times. At first, the comments were subtle. Someone joked about how long it must have taken me to get ready, like it was a lot of work for not much result. Another called me brave for wearing my hair in a bun because not everyone can pull that off. It was the kind of thing where you can't tell if it's an insult or not, but you feel your cheeks heat up anyway. I looked at Daniel a couple of times, hoping he'd shut it down, but he just smirked and kept sipping his drink. Then his friend Tyler showed up. I've never liked Tyler. He's the kind of guy who thinks being loud is a personality. He slapped Daniel on the back, said, "My man, ready for the big night?" In this way that made everyone else snicker, and then looked me up and down like I was a used car. "You didn't tell us she was going to try to be a 10, he said, then added, "She's at least a solid 7-ish tonight. In the right lighting." More laughter. Daniel laughed too. Not a small, nervous laugh. A real one. He didn't even look at me to see how I took it. One of the girlfriends said, "Come on guys, be nice," and Tyler waved her off. "I'm just saying," he went on. "For a guy like you, Danny, you sure you want to lock this down forever? You could still upgrade, you know?" And then, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, Daniel shrugged and said, "Relax. She tries. She's not exactly a 10, but I've seen worse." The table roared. That's the moment everything went sideways in my head. I felt the blood rush to my face and this cold, shaky feeling in my chest. This is the man who used to kiss me with no makeup on and tell me I was perfect. This is the man who took pictures of me when I thought I looked like trash and set them as his phone background. I stared at him and said quietly, "What the hell?" He didn't meet my eyes. He just took a sip of his drink and changed the subject. I should have gotten up and left. I know that. But I kept telling myself he's nervous, maybe this is his messed up way of coping, maybe he's trying to impress his friends for some reason, and after he proposes we'll have a very serious talk about how not to joke about me. So I sat there holding on to that story in my head like a life raft. After dinner, the server brought out some kind of special dessert platter with sparklers, and my heart went wild. This was it. I saw his mom at another table watching us with this weird tight smile. My sister later told me she was on her phone refreshing our group chat, waiting for the picture of the ring. Daniel stood up and tapped his fork against his glass for attention. People turned in their chairs. The restaurant got that hush that happens when everyone feels something big is coming. I can still see him in my mind, standing there in his button-down shirt, hands a little shaky, eyes bright but not the kind of bright I expected. He cleared his throat and said, So thank you all for coming out tonight. I wanted to do this with everyone here because you're all important to me. I gripped the edge of the table. The girls at the far end started whispering. Someone had their phone up, already recording. And then he took a breath and said, I've been thinking a lot about my life lately, and I realized I can't go through with it. The room went weirdly quiet. One of his friends shouted, Go through with what? And laughed like he thought this was the setup to a punchline. Daniel swallowed and said, With the relationship, with being engaged, I can't do it. For a second, I thought I misheard him. My brain refused to accept the words. I actually waited for him to follow it up with something like, I can't do it because I need her to be my wife now, or some cheesy line. Instead, he kept talking. We're not right for each other, he said. I need to be honest. I don't think I can spend the rest of my life with someone who doesn't really fit me, and it's not fair to either of us. He never used the word ugly then, but the way he had been talking about me all night, the way his friends had been talking, it didn't matter. Everyone knew what he meant. There were little gasps and awkward coughs. I heard someone say, Is this for real? Under their breath. I just stared at him, my ears ringing. Daniel, I said, my voice shaking, can we talk in private? He shook his head like that would ruin his little speech. I think it's better this way, he said. Rip the Band-Aid off. Then he mumbled something like, I'm sorry, Claire, and walked away from the table. He left the restaurant. He left me sitting there with my heart on the floor, in front of all his friends, a couple of my coworkers who had come to celebrate, and a room full of strangers. I don't even remember getting my card out. I just remember the server coming over with the check and saying in this apologetic tone, He told me you'd be taking care of the bill. The bill was huge. We're talking dinner and drinks for 12 people at a nice place plus dessert. Some of them threw down a little cash like, Oh, here's for my appetizer. But no one offered to actually split it. I signed my name with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking, thinking, I can't believe I'm paying for the privilege of being humiliated. When I finally stumbled outside, I realized my mascara had run all down my face. It had started raining lightly. It felt like a movie, except in the movie the girl usually gets a happy ending in the same scene, and all I got was wet. My sister found me on the sidewalk and drove me home. I spent the next week on autopilot. I called off work for 2 days and lied that I had the flu. I blocked Daniel on everything because if I saw his name pop up I knew I'd probably cave and listen. My mom wanted to go talk to his mother, but I told her absolutely not. I knew if I let our families get involved, it would become this massive drama, and I didn't have the energy. I just wanted to sleep and not wake up with that scene playing in my head. Then about 3 weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number that said, Hey, it's Olivia. Can we talk? Olivia is one of the girlfriends in his friend group. We were never super close, but we'd gotten drinks a few times together after group events. I asked what it was about, and she said, It's about what happened at the restaurant. I feel sick keeping my mouth shut. That sentence alone made my stomach twist. We met at a coffee shop across town so we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. She looked like she hadn't slept well in days. As soon as we sat down, she said, I'm so sorry. I should have said something earlier. I asked, said what? And she told me. A few nights before the dinner, there had been a guys' poker night at Tyler's place. The girls were in the living room watching a movie while the guys drank and played cards in the dining room. Apparently, the walls are thin, and Olivia overheard more than they thought. She said the guys were making those stupid macho jokes, and someone asked Daniel if he was really going to propose. Tyler started in on him saying stuff like, Dude, you're really going to tie yourself down now? You could still find someone hotter, more fun. You're out of your mind if you think this is the best you can do. Normal gross stuff she'd heard before. Daniel told him to shut up, said he loved me, that he was ready, but they wouldn't let it go. At some point, Tyler made it into a bet. 10,000 says you don't have the balls to call it off, he said to Daniel. Everyone laughed. Then Tyler added, And if you actually dump her in front of us, I'll cancel the debt and throw in another 5. That's when Olivia realized there was something else going on. Turned out Daniel had gotten into a bad investment with Tyler and owed him money. A lot of money. She didn't know all the details, but she heard enough to know that Tyler had been using that debt to control him, pushing him around, making him the butt of every joke, and Daniel just took it because he was embarrassed and didn't want anyone else to find out. She said Daniel laughed it off at first, said, "I'm not doing that. I'm proposing, not breaking up." But as the night went on and they drank more, Tyler kept circling back to it, needling him. "Thought you were a man. Guess you like safe and average. That kind of garbage." And then the part that made my stomach churn, Olivia said she heard Daniel say, "Fine. If I do it, the debt is gone." "For real?" And Tyler said, "If you do it my way in public in front of us, yeah. Wipe the slate clean." When she told me that, I just stared at her. I think I actually laughed a little, not because it was funny but because my brain couldn't handle how pathetic it sounded. I asked, "So I was a price tag?" She shook her head hard and said, "I don't think he saw it that way at first. I think he panicked and made a really stupid decision, and then instead of backing out, he doubled down. He looked sick the whole night at dinner. You didn't see his face when he went to the bathroom." I did. He looked like he was going to throw up. I asked her why she was telling me now. She said, "Because I watched that whole thing and did nothing. And then I watched Tyler high-five the guys when you left and heard him say, 'Easy money.' And it made me want to crawl out of my skin." She had been fighting with her own boyfriend about it ever since. Hearing that didn't make me feel better exactly, but it did change the shape of the hurt. It went from "he doesn't love me, I'm not attractive enough" to "he loved me, but his fear and pride were bigger than his love." And somehow that stung even worse. I told Olivia thank you for telling me. I went home and unblocked Daniel on one app, just long enough to send him a message that said, "I know about the bet. Meet me tomorrow at noon at the park. You get 10 minutes. After that, I never want to see you again." The next day, he was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench looking like he hadn't slept in days. He'd lost weight. His face was pale. For a split second, the part of me that still loved him wanted to hug him, but I stopped myself. He stood up and tried to reach for my hands, and I stepped back. "Just talk," I said. He didn't try to deny anything. He admitted it right away. He said he'd messed up big with some money at work and then borrowed from Tyler to cover it, thinking he'd pay it back quickly. Then the market shifted, he made another bad call, and the debt got bigger. He said he was so deep in it that every time he saw Tyler, all he felt was shame. And then the bet happened. He said he told Tyler no at first, but every time they hung out after that, Tyler kept joking about the deadline, about how Daniel wasn't man enough to do it, about how he was going to be chained for life to someone who's not even that hot. I flinched at that part, even though I'd already heard worse. "And you believed him?" I asked. "About me?" He shook his head and started crying, like actual tears. "No," he said. "I've never believed that about you. Not once. I felt cornered. I felt like if I didn't do something, I was going to lose everything, and I was too scared to be honest with you about how badly I'd screwed up. So I picked the worst possible way out instead of asking for help." He said the night of the dinner, he almost called it off 5 times. He had the ring in his pocket. He said his plan was to propose first and then tell Tyler to go to hell. Then Tyler pulled him aside before we sat down and said, "Clock's ticking, man. Either you do it tonight, or I start making some calls about that money." He said he felt like he was going to pass out. I asked him, "Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you come to me and say, 'I screwed up, I'm scared, I owe this guy money and he's being a monster about it'?" He looked at me like that thought had never fully landed for him. "Because I didn't want you to see me as a loser," he said. "I wanted to be the guy who had it together, the guy who could give you everything, not the guy who begged his girlfriend to help him out of a mess." And there it was, the real answer. His pride was louder than his love. I told him that. I said, "You didn't just break up with me. You humiliated me in front of your friends, your mother, coworkers, strangers. You made fun of how I look to impress a man who doesn't care about you. You turned me into a joke so you wouldn't look weak." He kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," but it started to sound like noise in my ears. Before we left, he handed me an envelope with a cashier's check inside. It was enough to cover the entire restaurant bill and then some. He said, "I know it doesn't fix anything, but you shouldn't have had to pay for that." I took it because paying that card off felt like closing a door. I told him I hoped he'd learn from this, that someday, when he was older and maybe less afraid, he'd look back and understand just how much he'd thrown away that night. Then I told him I never wanted to see him again and walked away. Olivia later told me the friend group kind of imploded. She broke up with her boyfriend after he kept trying to defend Tyler. A couple of the guys stopped hanging out with Tyler altogether when they realized just how far he'd pushed Daniel. I heard through the grapevine that Daniel got a different job and moved out of the city. I don't know if that's true. I stopped checking. A few months later, my sister took me back to that same restaurant on my birthday. We sat at a small table near the front, just the two of us. She ordered the sparklers dessert and told the server it was for me. When the server set it down and asked what we were celebrating, my sister said, "She's celebrating that she dodged a really big bullet." We both laughed. This time, no one called me names. No one bet on my heartbreak. I went home that night, looked at myself in the mirror in that same blue dress, and realized something important. It was never about me being pretty enough or good enough. It was about him being too cowardly to be honest and too scared to disappoint the wrong people. I'm not ugly. I'm not a bet. I'm not a bill someone has to pay to prove they're brave. I'm a person who deserved a real partner, not someone who folds the second his ego is on the line. Someday I'll tell this story to someone new, and we'll laugh about how ridiculous it all was. But for now, I just needed to get it off my chest. And I'm curious, honestly. If you found out your partner humiliated you because of a bet and their own fear, would you ever consider giving them a second chance? Or would you do what I did and walk away for good?